Hey there, film fans! Fun fact, did you know that when Disney released Princess and the Frog in 2009, over 50 kids contracted salmonella from kissing frogs? Uh-oh. Hey there, cinema buffs! Fun fact, did you know it took until the year 2000 for Disney to allow workers at their parks to have facial hair? Whoopsie! Hey there, movie lovers! Fun fact, did you know that in 2005, Disney inadvertently produced and released actual fascist eugenics propaganda?
In 2008, the term liberal fascism was coined by conservative journalist Jonah Goldberg, the title for his new book, which explored what he called a dangerous misunderstanding of fascist ideology. Goldberg's assertion primarily was that the word fascist is simply brandished as a generic slur, a meaningless political label used to demonize one's opponents. The most logical response to this, apparently, being to write over 400 pages of connections between Nazis and the liberals he disagrees with so that he, in essence, can demonize his opponents. What stands out about Goldberg's analysis is firstly that he seems to trip over himself whenever directly addressing liberal ideology, often accidentally or even deliberately referring to socialists and communists as liberal when those are not the same ideology, referring in turn to liberalism as anti-capitalist despite liberalism, especially in the modern day, being specifically for free market capitalism. This makes it hard not to feel, at points, like Jonah's methodology isn't entirely sound. Secondly, the evidence by which Goldberg makes his claims is primarily composed either of rhetoric spouted by later fascist dictators, such as Hitler's spinning of his party as socialist in nature and being primarily for the good workers of the fatherland, or strained guilt by association takes. You hear that, conservative audience? The Nazis opposed child labour. What does that tell you? The former ignores the reality that, in fact, politicians will often lie about their intentions to get into office. And, as it turns out, particularly violent and toxic ideologies like fascism need more prettying up than most to become widely appealing. The latter makes some pretty broad swipes that seem like they amount to something damning, but when broken down amount to logic like fascists like to nationalize things, socialists like to nationalize things, so socialists are fascists. The Nazis liked vegetarianism, socialists like vegetarianism. You can see where I'm going with this. As Jon Stewart himself
Nazis
put
were
it,
obsessed with the concept of the organic. They were obsessed with the idea that we're all in it together, that we are all part of this organic whole. The early environmentalist movement the first green movement in Europe it feeds into Nazism.
But that's literally like saying mustaches are fascist.
No, it's not.
Hitler had a mustache.
It's absolutely not.
I was unconvinced by Goldberg's assertion that fascism was a liberal concept, not least because he seemed to gather up a generalized notion of all vaguely left-of-center ideologies for his conclusion, but also because of how fundamentally Goldberg had sought to abstract liberalism and fascism from the actual material realities of who supports them and what they represent. I mean, yeah, Hitler did like animal rights just like the left does, but there was also, you know, the strict societal hierarchy, the intolerance towards marginalized groups, the exact opposite of what most leftists stand for. It's sort of a key component. And then, Sky High happened. And oh my children, I learned the true horrors of liberal fascism. In a speech on his book, Goldberg offered a theoretical email argument he had with a critic of his book. I say theoretical because it almost definitely did not happen, since within minutes he asserts him physically watching his opponent's reaction, which it's not how emails work. In any case, Goldberg poses the question to his lib-cut critic. Aside from the murder and the bigotry and the genocide, what do you dislike about fascism exactly? And the silly liberal has no answer. Being obviously made up as a straw man for a conservative, I was reticent to take this envisioned soy boy at face value. And then I saw Sky High, and I thought, you know what? Yeah, some people totally wouldn't know how to answer that question, because here we have a fascist utopia Goldberg proposed. Fascism without the genocide, without the violence and the murder, and all of a sudden, nobody sees it as fascist. In case you didn't happen to watch an obscure live-action Disney movie from 2005, I'll follow with a summary.
Mom and Dad. That's me in the middle.
Will Stronghold is the prodigal son of superhero crime-fighting duo The Strongholds, played here by Kurt Russell and Kelly Preston, two of the most famous and powerful of a world already filled with superhuman vigilantes. The Strongholds, not Kurt Russell and Kelly Preston. Or they might be vigilantes. There's kind of a secret society thing going on with superpowers in this movie where it seems like their identities are secret, but also regular police never seem to show up to deal with anything, so maybe they are just the law enforcement. Anyway, point is the world here is filled with superpowers, and when you know it, Will Stronghold doesn't seem to have one. Stronghold, not wanting to shame his parents for failing to live up to the family legacy, hides his lack of ability, even up to the point of heading into his first year as freshman at superhero high school Sky High, while still lying about the fact. Oh yeah, to keep the school safe from the bad guys, they keep it suspended thousands of feet in the air, you see, which is a very good idea. Will gathers a gang of colourful superhero co-eds, from childhood friend Layla to worst version of Cookie from Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide, Ethan. It's here that we start to see an odd emphasis the film has on bloodline and heritage, as Will's friend group, for the most part, appears to form itself around his position as a stronghold. And in many cases, Will is even shown getting preferential treatment thanks to his purported genetic superiority. Now, at this point in the movie, I thought we were going to veer into the world of class privilege, with Will going down an unearned easy street due to the status of his parents, but let's keep going for now. Are those guys dead? So it turns out the school, and society broadly as a whole, categorizes superhumans into two camps: heroes and sidekicks, or as those silly progressives call them.
I believe the preferred term is hero support.
Sidekick has in recent years become more like a derogatory slur for an inferior person than a legitimate label, you see. And it's not hard to see why. Sidekicks in this movie are all but always played as somewhere between pathetic and desperate, sad failures rivaling even the most dreaded of social groups, people without powers. Anyway, it's assignment time, and out comes the fiery military man gym coach Sonic Boom. Layla, the Lisa Simpson of the group, makes perhaps the most on-the-nose observation about this whole process.
Sounds fascist.
Which is, of course, played for laughs and given no further consideration. Sonic Boom declares anyone opposed to this system a whiner baby, and there's almost a hint of satirical critique here, like we're supposed to be mocking the idea of a system like this, but for the most part, the movie, I assure you, is going to be playing this completely straight. Students are forced to publicly demonstrate their abilities with cars dropped on them to boot. Heroes are praised, sidekicks are mocked, and Will Stronghold gets saved by the lunch bell. Newly appointed hero supports get some ribbing from their betters, and the school PA gleefully announces that sidekicks are not allowed to purchase hero sandwiches. Wait, didn't we just establish hero support was the preferred term? Apropos of, well, you know, Will gets asked to serve as freshman representative by student body president Gwen Grayson, played here by Mary Elizabeth Winstead, and cementing her mid to late 2000s career as girl who barely gets to be a character because the main dude just stares at her and ignores what she says. We're thus introduced to Warren Peace, which is a fantastic name, the son of a supervillain who was taken down by Will's dad many years ago. Warren, as expected, holds a huge grudge against Will for that reason, further reinforcing the importance of heritage in this society. Then it's back to power placement, and misunderstanding Will's admittance that he doesn't have any powers, Coach Sonic drops a truck on him, killing Will instantly. Will heads to the infirmary, and is forced to admit that he may be a broken freak without superpowers, just like the stinky bus driver. He heads home and readies himself to announce the news to Mum and Dad, but they're so damn bursting with pride at the very idea that Will is in superhero school that his father immediately takes him down to his super secret sanctum. They have a dad-son bonding moment that maybe sets off some alarm bells if you've just finished rewatching Guardians of the Galaxy 2, as I had. And Will continues hiding his dark, dark secret. I guess I'll take a break to broadly go over the history of eugenics, particularly as it pertains to American pop culture. A common misconception is that eugenics finds its basis with Adolf Hitler, and therefore that it specifically relates to the whole blonde-hair, blue-eye, Aryan white race hang-up he'd been influenced by. But it goes a lot deeper than that. Literally translating to good creation, eugenics is more based around the broad notion that traits can be bred in and out of society, that by putting together strong, intelligent, high-class people, we can theoretically make incremental improvements to the stock of humanity. Kicked off by Plato and reintroduced by scholars like Francis Galton, the theory was particularly popular in the US. Laws were instituted which allowed for the mentally ill or disabled to be forcibly sterilized, while John Harvey Kellogg, yes, that Kellogg, established a pedigree registry through his own Eugenics Foundation. Look, the guy invented cereal to stop people jerking off. He had a pretty weird relationship with sex. Native Americans were also in the chopping block, with thousands being unceremoniously sterilized right up to the 1970s. It's difficult to pin down exactly what Americans found so fascinating about the idea of eugenics. The best I can come up with is how well it plays into that whole idea of manifest destiny. America was founded by the notion of creating a society in the unique, virtuous image ordained by God, and by extension the population themselves can be manicured in this way. Forced sterilization of citizens seems like it conflicts with other founding notions like freedom and liberty, but hey, when's that ever stopped them before? And that love of eugenics runs through across time, an endless fascination that pops up even to present day. That whole Gulliver's Travels idea of a distant land of superior humanoids pops up with heroes like Superman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, and Thor. All characters not only born to an advanced race, but also specifically descendants of the royal bloodline. Think, off the top of your head, the amount of media about a hero who discovers they're a secret blood descendant of some great or magical person. You need only look to the reaction to a revelation that a Star Wars Jedi's prowess might not be tied to genetic heritage to see how attached the West is to eugenic storytelling. Because, hey, what's this weird idea that we're not objectively better than someone else because of the circumstances of our birth? And thus, we return to Will's stronghold. Will has an emotional conversation with Layla, who attempts to console him by insisting that the whole system of dividing people into genetic groups is stupid and arbitrary. Will is unconvinced by all this SJW talk, but he appreciates the support, and thus they begin their hero support classes, headed by old sidekick of Will's dad, All-American Boy. All-American Boy is a sad joke of a person, desperate to please despite his subpar abilities as an ousted sidekick who never quite got over it. After nearly having a mental breakdown at the revelation that Will's dad never considered him even worth mentioning over the last 15 years, All-American Boy announces to the kids a few of their legal limitations as hero supports. They don't get to pick their own hero name, theme, or outfit, and will be assigned or chosen by a respective hero who will then make the call on those fronts. A training montage follows, further highlighting Will's ineptitude and okay, I guess Will is actually one of the more competent students shown here, succeeding where his superpowered co-eds fail. Seems like a bit missed opportunity, I don't know. Anyway, later that night, Will invites his collective sidekick pals over to study, and what follows is the scene that made me decide to make this video. In a scene which feels reminiscent of something from Inglourious Bastards, Will's dad appears in full uniform, and the students take turns awing at his presence as he proceeds to confront them one by one, requesting their names and their powers. Like, some serious purity checks going on here. Dad becomes visibly uncomfortable on being informed of some of the lackluster superpowers he's having explained, and quickly shuffles off away into the kitchen before requesting Will join him and explain. As Daddy mumbles about how low the standards have gone with the school, Will assures his father that these are sidekicks and not heroes he's studying with tonight. Dad is taken aback, but impressed by Will's progressive mindset, admitting that he would never have been brave enough to socialize with sidekicks, and even proclaiming that Will's grandfather would not have let them into the house. Disney movie! I also want to take this moment to highlight the tuna fish sandwich Kurt Russell makes here. What the fuck is this? Will admits to his dad that, in fact, he is also a sidekick.
Couldn't make the big time, so now he thinks he can pass judgment on some real heroes' kids, huh?
Where the movie seems to verge on a very, very dark turn, Dad pulls back and blames Sonic Boom's poor assignment process, still in denial that his son could simply not be hero material. Will finally declares that he has no powers. While Will's friends are proud of him declaring his allegiance to him, his dad is speechless and takes his frustrations out in the basement. He and Will's mother admit to one another how disappointed they are by this development, and briefly consider conversion therapy.
But we can't change who he is, not without dropping him in a vat of toxic waste. Steve!
Oh no, where would we even find a vat of...
Steve! me!
Yep. The next day, Will tries to adjust to life as an out and proud no powers guy, defending bus driver Ron from superpowered bullies Bunk and Skull. They continue to bully Will until he accidentally trips over Sonic the Hedgehog, a misunderstanding that quickly grows into a full-on fight. Warren demonstrates his superpower, Giant Flame Fist, in an attempt to legitimately murder Will. Will tries to make it to a fire alarm to get the sprinklers going, but is tripped up by one of the bullies. It seems like it's all over for Little Stronghold as he cowers under a table, until...
He's strong.
I'm strong.
He's super strong.
That's right, kids. You thought you saw where this was going? You spent this whole video thinking, well, it's obviously going to be about how you don't need powers to be a hero and be a criticism of eugenics. You got tricked, fools. In fact, Stronghold's simply a late bloomer, and flinging Warren across the food hall demonstrates his potential to be just as strong, if not even stronger than his beloved papa. Stunned silence followed by cheering. Will is exactly the Ubermensch he was prophesied to be. He chucks Warren through walls and eventually dispatches him with a quick hose down, finally being stopped by stern Principal Powers. "Hi," says Will. The kind of hi that a man says when he has finally grown from a simple boy. An interesting quirk in storytelling, particularly stories aimed at younger audiences, is that realistically the heroic protagonist character always will be the chosen one, in a sense. Sure, you can subvert the predestined hero trope a la Harry Potter, or even ignore the chosen one idea a la Steve Rogers, a man who very specifically was not born quote-unquote genetically superior. But the reality is that for the mechanics of the story to work, it will be our protagonist who has the greatest positive impact on the story, and if written competently, it'll usually be because of specific traits inherent to them.
It's a unit system. I know this.
The day could not have been saved by anyone but them, or else, the story would be about that other person. In universe, they are not predestined to be heroes, but in terms of narrative, they were destined to save the day from the moment they were chosen as the protagonists. Will Stronghold always was going to be the greatest hero of them all, because he's the main character. It was not going to follow through on the premise that Will legitimately is locked out of being a hero because of genetic inferiority, a fact of this society that is constantly being reinforced. The thing here is that the film still feels the need to justify that, not just narratively, but in universe. And so, for Will to be respected as a superhero in this world, he needs to have powers. I'm not going to go into how much narrative potential is squandered here by just waiting halfway into the movie and then making Will exactly the superhuman he wanted to be at the start, no longer having to deal with any of the conflict between his desires and the system around him. I'm not going to go into that. I could, but I won't. It's probably not good to criticize a film for what you wanted it to be. Anyway, away from the sidetrack, Will gets home, elated by these developments, now suddenly sporting a slick new haircut that just screams advanced lifeform, and almost gets chastised for destroying an entire wing of the school. Of course, Commander Stronghold can hardly wait a moment before exploding with joy, showing his son a love and warmth unseen up to this point in the film. He was successfully converted, and he didn't even need the potentially life-threatening radiation therapy. Have an Xbox. Despite her earlier statements about Will being great for who he is, Layla too praises Will for getting his powers, claiming that this will help break down barriers between hero and sidekicks, proving that maybe we're all just people with our own individual strengths and weaknesses.
Sidecar basics, except for you, Mr. Stronghold. Would you gather your gear and come up here, please? I've got your new class schedule.
Uh-oh.
What about them?
What do you mean, them, Will? In his new class, Will gets paired up with Ramona, who proceeds to help him out by constructing his freeze ray on his behalf, demonstrating her technokinesis abilities. That'll be important later, but maybe. Freezing people kills them, movie! Grayson flirtatiously offers to serve as Will's private science tutor, as we all attempt to ignore the fact that this is a 17-year-old flirting with a 14-year-old. Cutting it a bit close there, ain't we? In the lunch hall, Will finally gets to sit at the hero table, and predictably, immediately dishes his old sidekick friends. He tries to apologise by offering to take his friend Layla out on a not day, an arrangement that will totally benefit Layla's future mental health. Will gets hassled more by the bullies and decides to take a stand, which they respond to by challenging him to a game at PE. It's a game of Save the Citizen, because apparently it's good for the students to play games where one half is told to use their powers for evil. The bullies get first pick, so decide to pair Will up to his worst possible partner, Warren. What follows is a hectic fight involving tripping people over, pushing people over, and the destruction of random benches placed inside the arena. Warren gets trapped in a wind vortex, and seeing his rival slowly dying from being starved of oxygen in his brain, "Don't worry mate, it's just the bends," elects to pull him out of the vortex and fire him into a pit of spikes. Luckily it all works out and Team Will and Warren win the match. Will is praised by his dad as he unexpectedly sees Gwen there to meet him at home. His parents are aghast that Will has already caught himself a girlfriend so soon after becoming a super, praising not only her beauty, but also that despite him being only a freshman, she's a senior. Still a little bit weird. What did I tell ya? Layla gets ditched, spending the whole night waiting alone at a Chinese restaurant. On the bright side, it turns out Warren works at the Chinese place, and he quickly graduates from mysterious meanie to gay best friend. Meanwhile, Gwen, as head of the homecoming committee, asks the Strongholds if they'd be happy to attend the dance as guests of honor, and so they can receive Heroes of the Year awards. Because I guess they finally deserve some recognition, besides all of society being built around worshipping them. Will walks Gwen home and almost steals a kiss, until her dad, in possibly the best performance in the film, appears to put him in his place.
Oh, hi, Daddy. Bye, Will.
Bye. You're not that boy with the 6 arms, are you?
No, sir. Just two.
We'll keep them to yourself.
Yes, sir. Good night.
In possibly the saddest moment in cinematic history, even being unceremoniously ditched by her best friend and forgotten about is not enough to turn Layla away from Will, who she almost asks to homecoming before he arrives with the revelation that he's already going with Gwen.
Grayson. Can you believe it? Me, a freshman, going with the most amazing girl at Sky High.
Layla attempts to save this by proclaiming new bestie Warren to be her date to prom.
Try the other way around. Does anyone else need a date for homecoming?
I ship it. Warren makes it clear that he's only agreeing to this to make Will jealous. Yep, it's a love triangle thing. Fucking fantastic. If you haven't noticed by now, this movie has completely diverted from making any real statement about the dangers of marginalizing people through arbitrary categorization, and has instead descended into some good old-fashioned teenage angsty drama. See, this is maybe the true horror of the movie, the way it manages to utterly normalize a setting which even internally the film is constantly highlighting as oppressive and unfair. This isn't like some dystopian fiction, wherein it's clear there's something not quite right about the world around them. At a certain point, Sky High just sort of gives in to its pseudo-fascist setup. And so we go on, for the next 10 minutes or so, with a homecoming preparation montage and Will organising a party for all the cool kid heroes. Put off by all the hubbub, he decides he wants to invite over pals Layla and Zach, to which Gwen responds by making a strong argument for mutually beneficial segregation.
They'd be miserable.
Before Will can really process this, Gwen offers makeout time, which obviously means it's time to head into Dad's super secret lair. I guess a good old-fashioned bush in the garden isn't good enough for kids nowadays. In a borderline masochistic display, Layla decides to crash the party and is quickly mocked to tears by the heroes. She storms out, much to Will's chagrin, with him finally taking a stand and dumping Gwen as well as calling off the party. He heads to the Chinese place to try and catch up with her, but she's a no-show. Warren appears and brazenly admits to Will that the whole homecoming thing was just a way to make him jealous, but sadly this resolves with Will's realization of how much he means to Layla, and not a different kind of realization. As everyone gathers at prom, Will is resigned to spend his time at home, dejected and friendless, reading through his dad's old yearbook for some reason. Wait a second, zoom, enhance. Oh my god, that girl that looks exactly like Gwen. It's Gwen. And she took the big gun from the secret sanctum. Whoopsie-doo. That's right, Gwen was a supervillain all along. The Stronghold's arch-nemesis Royal Pain, as illustrated by these neon lights she made for the occasion. You gotta appreciate the effort they put into this stuff. Stronghold decides to take a blaster straight to the chest because he's just that cool, but it turns out the gun called the pacifier turns people into babies. I appreciate this plot turn exclusively because it means I get to imagine a tiny crying baby being put under the blanket in a giant hall filled with people and flashing lights, and then being violently revealed to the crowd. At least it grew up to look like Kurt Russell. As Royal Pain rampages around, turning everyone into infants, we as an audience get to delight on a meta level as hordes of babies are left shrieking on the ground as adults panic and sprint around all around them in a tiny, poorly lit arena. Against all odds, that's right, it's up to the sidekicks to save the day. They begin using their inferior powers for helpful things like lighting up an air vent, and eventually stumble upon Will, who's here to help. Layla immediately forgives him for being an awful human being to her for the entire run of the film, and they embrace in a long moment that really lets you stop and consider what an excellent foundation this is for an actual relationship. Oh, and I guess the bullies decided to be supervillains too? Huh, I suppose it wasn't actually a good idea to have classes in school where you ask the students to pretend to be evil. The sidekicks team up to take on the bad guys, by which I mean Warren and Layla, who are genetically heroes but chose to be sidekicks. Shout out to Ethan, who also steps up to the plate and fucking waterboards the stretchy bully. Another just fantastic shot. One of the babies is held terrified by Royal Pain, dressed in a way that makes me feel something, and then is confronted by Will. The battle begins. Repping the sidekicks, Layla shows those hero bullies that sidekicks aren't worthless after all by demonstrating that she's not actually a sidekick.
Royal Pain sabotaged the anti-gravity device. The whole school's gonna fall out of the sky.
You what? Nah, not sure about that one, love. Seems a bit of a stretch. The sidekick who turns into a guinea pig shrinks down to help the team out, a perfectly identified opportunity for a bestiality joke.
Look at those cute little legs.
Will and Royal Pain just sort of keep throwing each other at walls and tables and stuff until Pain decides it's no more games and chucks Will right off of the school. What will our hero do to save himself? What will he have learned from his experiences in the film that give him the edge to win? That's right, Will discovers he has natural flight powers, so heights aren't really a problem for him. Yep, Will literally just falls back on his superpowers and nothing else to save the day.
That's impossible!
How's that? I mean, his mum can already do it, and their established powers are often inherited. Think it through, mate. In our last gasps, Royal Pain sets off the anti-gravity thing so that the school starts falling. A good thing on our part, since it means we get a Tom Kenny cameo as a result.
Told you we didn't need that extra insurance.
Great. Will holds the school up just enough to buy the sidekicks time to chew up the wire and stop the thing. The day is saved thanks to superpowers. Sky High is not a subversion of fascist utopian rhetoric, it's just a literal depiction of it. At face value, it might seem like it's deeply critical of the kind of bloodline essentialism often propagated with this kind of story, with its sympathetic depiction of sidekicks and even the unpowered. Yet, deep below, Sky High does nothing to resolve any of the issues in the society it presents. As the Strongholds declare on brandishing their award to Will's sidekick crew, it belongs to them. They're the real heroes. Because that's the ultimate resolution here, that's what we learn. The sidekicks have demonstrated their usefulness, and that perhaps their abilities were underestimated. The issue was not the hero-sidekick dichotomy, but simply that they fit into a different place on that dichotomy than was originally thought. They're quote-unquote one of the good ones. The biggest issue in this fascist utopia is that high school is hard, and some people have to work harder than others. But hey, if they prove themselves, they get to hang out with the big boys too. Oh, time for a case of the not gays. And yes, if you are simply genetically superior, if you're super strong, ultra durable and can fly, you will save the day and you will get the goal regardless of your previous actions. When Goldberg described his version of fascism, when he described the kind of fascism without murder or genocide that he supposed liberals went for, I'm not sure Sky High is exactly what he was envisioning. But it's possibly just about the perfect encapsulation of it, because this is what the most comfortable liberal version of that otherwise completely opposing ideology looks like. Because at the end of the day, genetic essentialism isn't exclusively the domain of the far right, or at least its rhetoric employed by more than just them. Many people, especially those in the West, go along with this notion that we can inherit these kinds of limitations, and even the very notion that people can be objectively superior to others. It's how much of the education system is established over here. And if you saw my previous video on Venom, this is also where a lot of these ideas of the stupid redneck and the dumb Bronxite are rooted in some idea that you can be born in a stupid group and be written off because of it. I saw a shocking amount of this kind of rhetoric being thrown around particularly by Hillary voters around the 2016 elections, around the idea that she lost because, quote unquote, there are a bunch of dumb hicks out in the country and they're ruining it for us civilized people. And I get where those frustrations come from, but like with Sky High, I think we need to acknowledge how deeply problematic a lot of these tropes and ideas are rooted in. Though recent weeks have shown a great downward trend in out and proud extremists on the right, the fact is that it's something we've been seeing on the rise over the last decade, despite living in a society that pretty explicitly condemns fascism and Nazism. And while, yes, Sky High is just a Disney movie, these ideas do resonate, particularly when suggested to young people. The seed is planted indirectly because, well, it has to be. And as I've already underlined, the seed doesn't even need to be planted by those working in bad faith. We can all fall into these mindsets. One show which takes almost exactly the same premise from Sky High and does it, in my opinion, far more effectively, is an anime called My Hero Academia. It's also about an underdog hero born without powers being gifted super strength for a later age, thrown into a school of superhumans and even with a rival who also uses giant flaming fists. The core difference is that in this story, Deku, our will equivalent, was not born into his powers. He truly is not a hero due to his bloodline. Instead, Deku is a hero because he showed that no matter how stacked against him the odds were, he wanted to become a hero, and this catches the attention of his personal hero All Might. In the end, it's specifically because of Deku's personal attributes, because of his own willpower and determination, that All Might gifts him with superhuman abilities. This, in my opinion, is a far more healthy route for this kind of story, and this isn't me saying that Royal Bloodline or Chosen One stories can't be utilised, not at all. But I think that to more effectively create narrative and to tell a story that really means something to the many kids out there that don't feel special, or even feel like they're wrong in some way, a story that focuses on what we can do to be the truest versions of ourselves says a lot more than one about conforming to society's expectations ever could. Heroism is not a trait, it's an idea. Hey, you know what else is an idea? More videos! I'm trying to keep my updates to this channel regular, and another aspect of that is I want to stay in tune with what my viewers want to see from me in the future. If you like me content, I highly recommend keeping up with me on Twitter, since that's where I'll be putting up a lot of polls and interacting most with feedback. I'll also be putting up regular updates over on Patreon, which helps me keep the lights on over here. If you liked the video, of course your support would be massively appreciated, and if not, likes and shares on places like Reddit also help a ton. This week I want to give a huge special thanks to patrons Alba, Kristen Roars, Nick Schwert, Owen Mateson, Peter Coffin and Vraisha Zaris. Thanks for staying with me. To end, I'd like to again highlight, of course by no means do any of my above complaints mean that I think the writers, filmmakers or anyone involved in the production of Sky High are themselves fascist. I simply found it interesting how many connections could be made when looking at the film through that lens, which I felt made this a worthwhile case study into how that style of film can be made palatable. Unfortunate ideas do come about that, as I've already explained, don't necessarily follow what we really believe. It's a messy but inevitable part of narrative building. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed. Be sure to let me know your own thoughts and comments down below. Stay tuned for more on this topic in the coming weeks. Love you all, and have a good week. The hypocrisy of the left.